The morning light spread slowly across the mining colony of Orcs 9. The sun was a pale orange circle, shining weakly through the dust-filled air. The colony was built from old metal walls and recycled ships, a place where people worked long hours for small credits. Humans and aliens lived side by side, not because they wanted to, but because there was no other place to go. It was a world forgotten by the central planets. A world where rules came from far away and compassion had no place in the books of law. Inside the small maintenance sector, a man named Terran began his day. He was a human with tired eyes and rough hands. He worked as a mechanic, fixing broken filters and damaged oxygen pumps that kept the colony alive. His home was a small room near the pipes, made of scrap metal and dim lights. He had a daughter once, but she had been lost to illness years ago. Since then, Terran had lived quietly, spending his free time helping the orphan children who played in the lower streets. Most of those children were not human. They were alien kids left behind after wars and trade collapses. Terran repaired their small toys, gave them leftover food, and made them laugh for a few minutes before returning to his long shifts. That morning, when the sirens rang across the colony, Terran knew something serious was happening. The sound was not for fire or air loss. It was the sound of an announcement. People left their homes and gathered in the main square. The screens above the council tower came to life, showing the symbol of the Orcs 9 authority. A cold voice echoed through the air, repeating the same message in several languages. All orphan children without registration or guardianship are to be collected by the end of this week. They will be relocated under the Colony Resource Redistribution Program. At first, no one understood what that meant. Then someone whispered that relocation meant selling them. It was a trade agreement between the council and off-world companies that needed cheap labor. The crowd fell silent. The alien parents held their children close. The orphans, who had no one, looked around in fear. Terran stood still, his hands clenched tightly. He had seen injustice before, but this was different. These were just children, and now they were being treated as goods. The guards walked through the streets that evening. They carried data pads and metal cuffs, marking homes and counting names. Every unregistered child was listed. Those who tried to hide them were warned that they would lose their work licenses. Some tried to resist, but the guards had drones that recorded everything. The people learned to stay silent. Tane sat in his small workshop, staring at a broken oxygen valve. He tried to focus, but his thoughts kept returning to the faces of the children he had helped before. There was Leary, a quiet girl with blue skin and silver eyes who liked to collect shiny stones. There was Bryn, a thin boy with 3 fingers on each hand who always laughed even when hungry. They were orphans too. They would be taken soon. He tried to tell himself there was nothing he could do, but his heart disagreed. That night, Terran walked through the lower streets. The colony lights flickered weakly, and the wind carried the smell of metal dust. He saw the small group of orphans sitting behind a storage unit. Leary saw him first and ran up to him. She was trembling. "They say they will take us tomorrow," she whispered. Terran knelt down and looked at the children. There were 7 of them. Their eyes were full of fear. He could not find words to comfort them. He looked at the dark sky above and thought of his daughter. She had once held his hand the same way. He remembered her asking if people were kind. He had said yes, but now he was not sure anymore. He told the children to stay hidden and promised to bring them food. As he walked away, his mind was filled with a storm. The colony laws were clear, but his conscience was louder. He reached his workshop and sat by the door, staring at the rusty tools on the table. His old friend Morrow, another worker, entered quietly. Morrow was an alien with green skin and sharp eyes. He had seen Terran's face and knew what he was thinking. "Do not do anything foolish," Morrow warned. "You cannot fight the council. They have guards, drones, and off-world support." Terran looked up and replied, "Then who will fight for them if no one does?" Morrow sighed. "If you do this, you will lose everything. Your job, your home, maybe your life." Terran smiled sadly. "I already lost what mattered most." He stood up and opened his tool chest. Inside were cutting torches, metal rods, and old key cards from when he used to fix security locks. He started planning quietly, while Morrow watched in silence. There was no more talking after that. Morrow left before the curfew began, and Taryn stayed awake all night. The next day, soldiers entered the lower district. They brought hover trucks and containers. The orphans were gathered one by one. Some cried, some tried to run, but the soldiers were quick. Taryn watched from a distance, his fists shaking. The children he knew were being dragged away. The guards used the same cold tone for every order. When they reached Leary and Bren, Taryn could no longer stand still. He walked straight toward the guards. One of them pointed a weapon at him and ordered him to step back. Taryn ignored it. He looked at the children and said, "It's all right, I'm here." The guard repeated the warning, but before he could finish, Taryn hit the control pad on the cage lock with his wrench. Sparks flew, and the metal doors burst open. The children scattered in surprise. Taryn grabbed Leary's hand and shouted, "Run!" The alarm began immediately. Red lights flashed through the square. Drones rose into the air, scanning faces and chasing movement. The guards yelled and fired warning shots. Taryn led the children into the alleyways, knowing every corner from years of repair work. His heart pounded and his lungs burned, but he kept moving. The children followed, scared but trusting him completely. They reached the old maintenance tunnels under the colony. It was dark and cold, filled with the smell of oil. Taryn sealed the hatch behind them with a metal bar. The sounds of the search grew distant. The children sat on the floor, shaking. Taryn looked at them and felt both relief and fear. He had done what his heart demanded, but he knew the cost would come soon. Leary looked up at him with wide eyes. "Will they find us?" Taryn took a deep breath. "Not tonight. We will rest and move again at dawn." He walked through the tunnel, checking the old generators. Some still worked. He found a few energy cells and powered a small lamp. The light filled the space softly. The children huddled together, whispering. Bren tried to make a joke, but his voice cracked halfway. Taryn smiled weakly and handed them some water from his repair kit. He wished he could give them food, but there was none. He sat down near the wall and thought about what he had done. There would be no forgiveness from the council. He was now a criminal. His name would be listed on every station across the sector. But when he saw the children sleeping near the lamp, he felt something he had not felt in years. Hope above the tunnels, the colony was in chaos. The council declared Taryn a traitor. They sent patrols into every section and locked down the docks. The news spread quickly. Some people whispered that a human had freed the children. Others said it was madness. But among the miners and the poor workers, a quiet pride began to grow. Someone had stood up when everyone else had bowed their heads in the council tower. The officials discussed how to handle the situation. They could not allow rebellion. They decided to make an example of Taryn. A reward was offered for his capture. The traders who came to collect the orphans were furious, demanding compensation. The council promised to find him before the next sunrise. In the tunnel, Taryn could not sleep. He listened to the distant rumble of engines and the echo of his own heartbeat. He remembered his daughter's smile and the promise he once made to be a good man. Maybe this was what that promise truly meant. To protect the innocent, even when the world called it foolish. As dawn approached, he woke the children. They had to move before the search reached the lower tunnels. The air smelled heavy with dust, and the sound of drones hummed faintly above. Taryn led the group deeper underground, following old maps in his memory. There was a hidden service path that connected to the southern cliffs outside the colony. If they reached it, they could find a way to the desert fields and maybe reach another settlement. The journey began again, silent and tense. The tunnels were filled with old cables and dripping pipes. Leary walked beside Taryn, holding a small light crystal she had found. Bren carried a piece of metal as a stick. The others followed closely, their steps echoing softly. Taryn guided them carefully, checking every turn. Far above, the colony broadcasted his image. The message was clear. Taryn of Sector 7 is charged with rebellion and theft of government property. He is to be captured alive or reported immediately. But for those who watched, it was not rebellion they saw. It was courage. A single father, once broken by loss, now standing against power to protect children who were not even his own. The story began to spread beyond the colony walls, carried by traders and miners who whispered it like a legend. And deep below, unaware of the hope he had inspired, Terran kept walking into the darkness, holding the small hand of a child who believed in him completely. The sun rose over Orus 9 with a dull red glow. The sky was filled with clouds of dust, and the air smelled of rust and smoke. Inside the underground tunnels, Terran and the group of orphans were still moving. Their steps were slow, and their eyes were tired. They had walked for hours through narrow paths and dripping pipes. The light crystal in Leary's hand flickered weakly, but it was enough to show the way. Tern looked at the children. They were brave, even after everything that had happened. He could see fear in their eyes, but also trust. That trust gave him strength to keep going. He knew the guards would soon search the tunnels, and if they were caught, there would be no mercy. "Stay close to me," he said in a low voice. "No one goes alone. We move together." Children nodded. Bren tried to smile, but his lips trembled. "We will not slow you down," he said. Terran smiled back and placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You are not slowing me down. You are why I am still walking." The tunnels began to change as they went deeper. The air grew colder, and strange sounds echoed from the walls. These were the old maintenance sectors that had been closed years ago when new systems were built. Rusted doors and broken screens lined the paths. Some pipes hissed with small leaks of steam. Liri stopped and pointed ahead. "Look, there is light there." At the end of the tunnel, a faint glow came from a broken door. Terran moved carefully, checking for traps or cameras. Inside the room, they found old mining equipment covered in dust. There were metal boxes, cracked helmets, and an old generator. Terran opened one of the boxes and found dried ration packs. They were years old, but still safe to eat. He shared the food among the children. They ate quietly, their small hands trembling from hunger. Terran sat beside them, drinking water from his repair bottle. For a few minutes, the world outside felt far away, but peace never lasted long in Orus 9. Far above them, in the main command center, the council was growing impatient. The head officer, a tall man named Commander Roll, stood before the colony's governor. His voice was cold and firm. "We have locked every dock and searched all surface roads. The fugitive must be hiding underground. He cannot escape through the desert without air tanks." The governor nodded. "Then send the drones. Flush him out. The traders will arrive again by evening, and I do not want another delay." "Yes, sir," Roll replied. He turned to his men. "Deploy the seeker drones into the lower sectors. Scan for heat and movement. Bring him in alive." Within an hour, a swarm of drones entered the tunnels. Their red lights blinked in the dark, and the sound of their small engines echoed through the walls. Down below, Terran heard the faint hum. His body tensed. He knew that sound too well. "Everyone, get up," he whispered. "We need to move now." The children followed without question. Leary looked back, her light crystal shaking in her hand. "What is that sound?" she asked. "Trouble," Terran said. "Those are drones. They can see through walls. We must stay in the shadows." He turned off the small lamp and guided them through a narrow tunnel to the right. The path sloped downward into a darker section filled with collapsed walls. The air was damp, and the ground was uneven. A red beam of light passed behind them. The drones had entered the chamber they had just left. Terran pushed the children forward faster. Bren stumbled, but Terran caught him before he fell. They reached a large metal door at the end of the tunnel. The sign above it read Old Storage Bay 9B. Terran tried the control panel, but it was dead. He opened his repair kit and began working quickly, connecting wires and using his torch to power the circuits. The sound of drones grew louder. He could hear their mechanical voices scanning for life signs. The panel sparked to life. The heavy door began to slide open with a loud groan. Inside was a wide chamber filled with old mining machines. It smelled of dust and oil. Terran ushered the children inside and closed the door behind them. He looked around. The room was large enough to hide in, but there were broken walls and open vents that could expose them. In one corner stood a tall mining loader covered in dust. Taryn climbed onto it and checked the systems. It still had some power left. An idea formed in his mind. He turned to the children. "If they find us here, I will distract them. You will use that vent behind the loader to crawl deeper into the tunnels. Follow it until you reach an open shaft. Wait for me there. Do not stop, no matter what happens." Leary shook her head. "You cannot stay behind. They will take you." Taryn smiled sadly. "I have lived long enough fixing machines. Now I have a reason to fix something bigger. I will catch up. I promise." Brud. I'll read it. Bered. Underread. I'll try to write a tread at her. The drones had arrived. The lock started to spark as they tried to cut through. Taryn powered up the loader. Its old engine roared to life, shaking the walls. The children ran to the vent and began crawling inside. Leary looked back one last time, her eyes shining with tears. Taryn nodded to her. The door burst open, and red lights filled the room. The drones entered, firing stun beams in all directions. Taryn swung the loader's arm, smashing 2 drones at once. Sparks flew through the air. More drones surrounded him, their metal bodies glinting in the dim light. Taryn shouted over the noise. "Go now!" The loader crashed into another group of drones, crushing them under its heavy claws. The fight was short, but fierce. The loader took hit after hit, its armor melting under energy fire. But every second Taryn bought was another second for the children to escape. Finally, the loader stopped moving. Smoke rose from its engines. Taryn jumped out and ran for the back vent. The remaining drones chased him, firing beams that grazed his arm and leg. He crawled through the vent, his breath heavy. Behind him, the chamber exploded as one of the drones hit the generator. The blast threw him forward, and he landed hard on the ground. Pain shot through his body, but he was alive. Ahead, he saw the children waiting at the edge of a dark shaft. They ran to him as he struggled to stand. "You came back," Bren said with relief. Taryn smiled weakly. "I said I would." They moved down the shaft carefully. It led to an old transport rail that once connected the mines to the outer cliffs. The air here was thin, but the walls were wide enough for them to walk easily. They followed the path for hours, stopping only when the children were too tired to continue. As night fell above the colony, stars became visible through cracks in the tunnel ceiling. Taryn sat with the children near an old transport car. They rested quietly. Leary looked up at the stars and whispered, "They look free." Taryn followed her gaze. "They are, and one day you will be too." In the distance, faint lights flickered. Taryn narrowed his eyes. They were not stars. They were drones searching the cliffs outside. He realized the council had expanded the hunt beyond the tunnels. Time was running out. He studied the transport car beside them. It was rusted, but still connected to a rail that led toward the southern exit. If he could power it, they could ride it out of the colony before dawn. He began working on the control panel with his tools. Sparks flashed as he reconnected old circuits. While he worked, the children huddled together. Bren whispered, "Will we really be safe outside?" Taryn did not stop his work. "I do not know. But out there, at least you will be free." The engine gave a low hum. The car's lights flickered on. The rail ahead glowed faintly. It was working. Taryn helped the children climb inside. The car shook as the old systems came to life. He looked back one last time at the tunnel they had come through. He thought of his home, his small room, his lost daughter, and the colony that had become a prison for the weak. He felt no regret. He had chosen the right side. The car began to move slowly along the rail. The children looked out in awe as the dark tunnel opened into the wide desert cliffs. The night sky stretched endlessly above them, filled with stars and silence. For a moment, they forgot the fear. But far behind them, in the tunnels they had escaped, the drones found traces of their movement. Commander Roll received the signal in his control room. "They are heading for the southern cliffs," he said. "Send units to intercept. I want that man alive." As the transport car sped across the rails, Terran saw the distant lights of the colony shrinking behind them. The cold wind blew against his face, and the children held on tightly. He knew the journey was not over. The real test was still ahead. The desert was vast, and survival would be hard. But he also knew something else. The children had seen what courage looked like. They had seen a man who refused to obey cruelty. That memory would stay with them forever. The car rattled as it climbed a slope. Leary sat beside Terran and asked softly, "Why did you help us when you could have stayed safe?" Terran looked at her and said, "Because once, someone helped me. I was too young to understand it then, but I do now. Kindness is not a choice you make because it is easy. You make it because it is right." The car rolled on into the darkness of the open desert. The colony lights faded behind them, replaced by the glow of distant stars. The wind carried the sound of freedom. Mixed with the faint hum of engines chasing from afar, Taran placed his hand on the edge of the car and whispered to himself, not out of fear but with calm strength, "No one will chain them again." And so, the man who broke the chains continued his journey into the unknown, carrying hope where there had once been despair. The transport car rolled steadily along the rusty rails. The desert wind outside whipped through the open gaps, carrying the chill of early night. Terran held onto the side of the car, steadying the children as they peeked through the gaps. Their eyes reflected excitement, fear, and wonder. The world beyond the colony was vast, silent and empty, and for the first time, the children could breathe freely without the watchful eyes of drones or guards. Leary pressed her hand against the side of the car. "It feels strange to be free," she said. Taya nodded. "Freedom is always strange at first. You will get used to it." Bren leaned forward and pointed at the distant horizon. "Do you think the colony will let us go if they catch us?" Terran shook his head. "No, but we are not going back. We will find a place where no one can sell orphans or decide who lives and who does not." No. The car slowed as the old rail bent toward a narrow canyon. Rocks towered on either side, forming a natural barrier. Terran guided the children carefully. He knew the canyon was not marked on current maps, a forgotten path from the early mining days. If the guards followed, they would have trouble navigating the tight turns and cliffs. Suddenly, the wind carried a low rumble from behind. Terran froze. He scanned the horizon and saw faint lights bouncing across the desert. Drones had found the tracks. The colony was relentless. He whispered, "Hold on tight. We will have to move faster." The children braced themselves as the car picked up speed. Rocks and sand flew past them, scraping the sides of the vehicle. Bren laughed nervously. "It feels like flying." "Not for long," Terran said. "We must be careful. One mistake could send us falling into the canyon." As the car twisted along the path, Terran noticed a narrow gap in the rock wall. The canyon seemed to split into a hidden passage. He slowed the vehicle and examined the entrance. It was just wide enough for the car to pass. "This way," he said. "It is an old maintenance tunnel. It will take us far from the drones." The children moved closer, their small hands gripping the edges of the car. Leary asked, "Are we safe there?" Terran smiled softly. "For a while, yes. It is a place no one uses anymore." He steered the car into the tunnel. Darkness swallowed them immediately. The walls were jagged, and small pools of water reflected the faint light from the car's lamps. The air was cool, damp, and heavy. The children whispered quietly, their voices echoing in the long, narrow passage. Hours passed as they moved deeper into the hidden tunnels. Terran guided them carefully, checking every turn and listening for any sign of pursuit. Outside, the desert wind howled, carrying the distant hum of the drones. Inside, silence dominated. Only the soft whir of the car's engine and the children's breathing filled the space. They came to a small chamber where the tunnel widened. Old mining equipment sat abandoned, covered in dust and cobwebs. Taryn stopped the car and helped the children down. "We will rest here for a while," he said. Leary knelt near a puddle of water. "Do you think anyone will help us?" Taryn shook his head. "We cannot wait for help. We must rely on ourselves. That is what makes us strong." Bren found a broken crate and sat on it. "I like you, Taryn," he said. "You risked everything for us." Charon looked at the boy. "I do not see it as a risk. I see it as what I should have done long ago. Sometimes you must do what is right, even if the world tells you no." The children rested, eating the last of the rations Taryn had found. He watched them, remembering his daughter and the life he had once had. His heart ached with loss, but the presence of the children gave him purpose. Outside the tunnel, the desert sky began to change. Faint light of dawn colored the horizon. Taryn knew they could not stay hidden forever. The drones would continue searching, and the colony would send more patrols. He needed a plan to move the children further away from danger. He explored the tunnel carefully. Small pathways branched off the main shaft, some leading to collapsed chambers. He found a hidden ladder leading up to a narrow cliff path. If they could climb, they would reach a plateau that overlooked the desert fields. From there, they could find a safe route to another settlement. "Taryn, what is that way?" Leary asked, pointing at the ladder. "It is our path," Taryn said. "It will be difficult, but it is safer than the tunnels." The children climbed one by one. Bren struggled at first, but Taryn encouraged him, placing a hand on his back. Leary moved gracefully, her alien strength helping her climb faster. Taryn followed last, ensuring the path behind them was secure. When they reached the top, the desert stretched endlessly. Small oases dotted the landscape, and distant ridges marked the way to the next settlement. The children stared in awe. For the first time, they saw a world beyond the colony. Tane pointed to a small ridge. "That is where we go next. Keep together and do not make noise. We are not safe until we are far from the colony." The children nodded. Their small hands held each other, and Taryn led them across the rough terrain. The sand was loose, making each step difficult. Wind blew in their faces, carrying the smell of dry earth. Taryn moved cautiously, scanning the horizon for any signs of drones. Hours passed as they crossed the desert. The children grew tired, but Taryn encouraged them. "One step at a time," he said. "We are getting closer to safety." As night fell, they reached a narrow canyon that would provide shelter. Taryn found a small cave, hidden behind a cluster of rocks. Inside, the children rested while Taryn kept watch. He listened to the distant hum of drones and the soft whisper of wind. His mind worked quickly, planning the next steps. He knew the colony would not give up. The drones would continue searching, and the council would send more patrols. They needed allies, somewhere outside the colony. To ensure the children's safety, he thought of traitors who opposed the council, workers who had grown tired of cruelty, and travelers who moved between settlements. He could find help, but he had to be careful. One mistake could endanger them all. Tane looked at the children sleeping peacefully in the cave. Leary's hand was still holding his. Bren had fallen asleep leaning against a rock. He felt a quiet determination. He had risked everything to free them, and now he would risk more to keep them safe. The desert night was cold and silent. Stars twinkled above, brighter than in the colony. Taryn felt a sense of calm, knowing that for now, they were out of immediate danger. But he also knew the journey ahead would test them all. As the first light of dawn touched the desert, Taryn woke the children. "We must move," he said. "We cannot stay in one place too long. The council will search everywhere." The children rose, rubbing their eyes. They had grown stronger during the night, their trust in Taryn unbroken. They packed their few belongings and followed him across the rocky path. Taryn led them to a small stream where they could drink and refresh themselves. The water was cold, but it brought new energy to the group. Leary filled her small container, careful not to spill any. Bren played in the shallow water briefly, splashing quietly, then returned to Taryn. We must keep moving, Taryn reminded them. The farther we go, the safer we will be. There are people beyond the desert who will help us. The children nodded, their faces determined. For the first time, fear was not their only companion. Hope had entered their hearts. Carried by the man who refused to bow to cruelty, Taryn scanned the horizon one last time before they continued. The desert stretched endlessly, but he knew their path. They would find allies, escape the council, begin a new life where the children could grow without fear as they walked. Taryn whispered softly to himself, "We are not finished yet, but we are free enough to fight another day." The children followed him through the desert, their small hands clutching his as they moved toward the unknown, leaving the colony and its chains far behind. The desert stretched endlessly under the rising sun. Taryn led the children carefully, moving along small ridges to avoid leaving tracks that the council's patrols or drones could follow. The children were quiet, each lost in thoughts about what had happened in the colony. The taste of freedom was new to them, but it also carried the weight of uncertainty. Leary walked beside Taryn. "Where are we going?" she asked. Taryn looked at her and smiled. "There is a settlement beyond the western cliffs. People there will help us. They are not part of the colony. They understand that children should never be treated as property." Bren struggled to keep up. His small legs moved fast, but the desert sand slowed him. Taryn reached back and lifted him onto his shoulders for a few minutes until the boy could walk on his own again. The children laughed softly despite their exhaustion. Moments like these made the fear behind them feel distant. If only for a little while as they walked, Taryn noticed something unusual. Some of the children's eyes, especially Leary's, shimmered in the sunlight in a way he had never seen before. Their skin, faintly glowing under the desert light, hinted at something beyond ordinary. He had known they were alien, but now it seemed there was more to them than he had understood that evening. They reached the top of a plateau overlooking a hidden valley. The valley was lush and green, with a small river running through it. It was a place far from the desert and the colony, untouched and hidden. Taryn could see smoke rising from a small cluster of buildings on the far side of the valley. This must be the settlement he had heard about. He guided the children down a narrow path leading into the valley. The air grew cooler and fresher as they descended. For the first time since leaving the colony, the children were able to run freely without fear. Leary picked flowers along the path. Bren chased small desert creatures, laughing with delight. As night fell, they reached the settlement. The buildings were simple but sturdy, made of stone and wood. Humans and aliens moved together here, working and trading peacefully. People looked up in surprise when Taryn and the children arrived. The children were tired and dusty, but they still radiated the bravery that had carried them so far. An older man, Eldon, approached them. He had a kind face and gentle eyes. "Who are you and why are you here?" he asked softly. Taryn bowed his head slightly. "I am Taryn. These children were in danger. The colony wanted to sell them. I freed them and brought them here for safety." Eldon studied the children carefully. His eyes widened slightly when he looked at Leary and the others. "These are not ordinary children," he said. "Come inside. We must talk." Inside a small meeting hall, Eldon examined the children closely. He asked them questions about their past, their abilities, and their origins. Leary and Bren answered as best as they could. Taryn watched, feeling nervous. He had risked everything to save these children. But now it seemed there was more at stake than he had imagined. Eldon nodded slowly. These children are part of an experiment from a distant planet. They were chosen for a program designed to unite to alien species peacefully. Their DNA carries elements of both species, which is why their abilities are unusual. Taryn felt his stomach tighten. "You mean the colony wanted to sell them because of this?" he asked. Eldon shook his head. "Not just for sale. They wanted to destroy the program. The council never wanted these children to survive. They feared the union of species would challenge their control." The revelation stunned Taryn. He had thought he was simply protecting orphans from slavery. But now he realized the colony's intentions were far darker. He looked at the children who were listening quietly. Their faces showed confusion and fear. "They are special," Taryn said softly. "We must protect them." Eldon agreed. That is why you brought them here. The settlement can hide them. We can provide food, shelter, and education. But the council will not stop searching. You must be careful. Any mistake could lead them back to the children. Taryn nodded. I understand. I will not let anyone take them again. Over the next few days, Taryn and the children settled into the settlement. The villagers welcomed them warmly, giving them clean clothes and proper meals. The children began to play and explore the valley, their laughter echoing through the green fields. For the first time, they felt a sense of home and safety. Evening brought quiet moments. Taryn and Leary sat by the river, watching the water flow under the soft glow of the setting sun. Leary asked Taryn, "Why did you save us if it was so dangerous?" Taryn smiled faintly. "Because it is wrong to let others suffer when you can help. Freedom is worth more than fear." She nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the river. "I will not forget this," she said. "We will never forget you." Taryn felt a warmth in his chest. He had risked everything for these children. Their trust was the greatest reward he could have received, but safety was fragile. The council's patrols had not stopped. The drones were still searching the desert, and word of Taryn's actions had reached distant stations. Commander Roll was relentless. He had assigned a specialized task force to capture Taryn and the children. Late one night, Taryn heard a rustle outside the village. He grabbed a small lamp and went to investigate. Among the shadows, he saw a group of scouts approaching. He signaled to Eldon, who quickly gathered the villagers. The settlement was ready to defend itself. Taryn stepped forward. "These children are safe here. No one will take them," he said firmly. The scouts hesitated. They had orders to bring Taryn back alive, but the settlement's defenses were strong. Taryn realized that brute force alone would not save them. He needed a plan that used cunning and strategy, not just strength. He gathered the children and whispered to them, "We may need to move again. But remember what you have learned. Trust each other, stay together, and never give up. We will always find a way." The children nodded. Their eyes were filled with determination. Taryn felt pride in them. They had endured fear, hunger, and danger, but their spirits were unbroken. The following day, Eldon explained a hidden truth about the children's abilities. Each child had a small gift, a trait inherited from the experiment that combined the two species. Some could sense danger before it happened. Others could move faster than ordinary beings. These abilities were subtle but powerful. Taryn listened carefully. "We must train them. If the council finds us, they will come with greater force. The children must be ready to protect themselves," Eldon agreed. "We will teach them. But more importantly, they must understand why they are special. This knowledge will give them strength." Over the next weeks, Taryn and Eldon worked with the children. They taught them to move quietly, to hide, and to use their abilities wisely. The children learned quickly, their natural curiosity and courage helping them adapt. Leary became the leader among them, guiding the others with confidence. Bren learned to trust his instincts and move with precision. Each child discovered a strength they had never known. One evening, while training near the river, Leary asked Taryn, "Do you think the council will stop looking for us?" Taryn shook his head. "No, they will never stop. But we are stronger now. Together, we can face anything." The children felt hope. They had come so far, escaped danger, and discovered that they were not ordinary. They had a purpose, and someone who believed in them. Taryn had given them more than freedom. He had given them courage, trust, and the knowledge that they mattered. But the council was relentless. From afar, Commander Roll watched the desert through drones and sensors. He could see small signs of movement in the valley. "They have reached the settlement," he said coldly. "Prepare the task force. I want them captured before nightfall." Taryn sensed that the danger was approaching. He gathered the children and Eldon. "We must be ready. They will come and we cannot run forever. But we have something stronger than any force they can send. We have each other." The children nodded. They understood. Freedom was not just a place. It was a choice. It was courage in the face of fear. And with Terran by their side, they were ready to face whatever came next. As the sun set over the hidden valley, casting long shadows across the fields, Terran looked at the children. He whispered softly, "No one will ever take you from me. Not now, not ever." The wind carried their resolve across the valley, touching every tree, rock, and stream. The children were no longer just orphans. They were symbols of hope, courage, and the power of one human who refused to obey cruelty and far away. The council prepared to strike, unaware that their pursuit had only made the children stronger, their unity unbreakable, and their courage unstoppable. The sun over Varen Colony was red that morning. The sky burned like metal, and the air smelled of dust and smoke. People gathered in the square because the Trade Guild had promised a public show. In the center stood a raised stage made of steel plates. On it, a man was chained to a metal post. His face was tired but calm. His name was Marin, the human who had broken the guild's laws and freed the orphans. Crowds filled the streets, whispering his name. Some feared him. Some admired him. The alien officers stood in silver armor with glowing rifles in their hands. The guild leader, a tall alien with violet skin named Vorek, stepped forward and raised his voice so everyone could hear. "This human," Vorek said, "defied the law of Varen. He broke into our property, destroyed the guild's prison gates, and stole what belonged to the Trade Council. For this, he will be made an example." The guards pulled the chain tighter. Marone fell to his knees, but did not speak. His body ached, yet his eyes stayed fixed on the sky. Somewhere out there, he hoped the orphans had escaped safely. But the orphans were not gone. Far beyond the crowd, in the broken tunnels under the colony walls, a small group of children crouched around a flickering holomap. The leader among them was Rin, the boy who once believed he could do nothing. Now he was holding a small metal chip glowing with blue light. "He is alive," Rin said quietly. "The guild is showing him to everyone before they end it. They want to make people afraid." One of the younger children, Lena, whispered, "Can we stop them?" "There are too many soldiers." Rin nodded slowly. "We will not fight them with strength. We will fight them with what he taught us." Marone had once told them that courage was not in the body but in the heart. They remembered his words now. The children began their plan. They had small tools, scrap drones, and old devices from Maron's workshop. Together they started to move through the tunnels toward the central square. On the surface, the execution platform buzzed with power. Vorek gave orders for the energy rods to be activated. The people watched in silence as a glow surrounded Marone. The sound of energy humming filled the air. Suddenly, one of the guild's drones in the sky turned and crashed into a light post. Another drone began spinning out of control. Then another fell from the air. Confusion spread across the guards' faces. "What is happening?" Vorek shouted. A young guard looked at his screen and said, "Sir, the security grid is being hacked." From the shadows near the crowd, small shapes began to appear, children in worn clothes, holding small metal devices. They moved fast and silent. The people gasped as one drone after another exploded in blue sparks. Then a loud voice echoed through the square. It was Rin, standing on top of a broken vehicle. "Let him go," he shouted, "or you will lose control of everything you've built on lies." Vorek turned his weapon toward the boy. "Children," he growled. "You think you can challenge the guild?" Rin pressed a button on his device. The giant screen behind the guild tower flashed to life, showing images proof of the guild's crimes. Videos of children in cages, workers beaten, and ships full of stolen goods. The entire colony saw what had been hidden. Gasps filled the air. The crowd began to murmur. The guards hesitated. Even some of the alien officers lowered their rifles, unsure what to do. Vorek shouted, "Shut it down." But it was too late. The orphans had taken control of every screen, every drone, every broadcast tower. Marone lifted his head and saw the children standing in the crowd. His heart filled with fear and pride at the same time. "Rin," he whispered, Rin and the others ran forward, dodging the guards. The people began to move aside, making a path for them. Marone pulled against his chains, trying to reach them. Vorak pointed his weapon at Rin. Stop there, or the human dies. For a moment, the square went silent. The red sun burned above them, and the wind carried dust through the air. Then Rin said, "You already tried to kill his hope." That failed. Pressed another switch. The entire power grid of the colony began to flicker. The great walls that kept people trapped inside the guild's city went dark. Lights went out. Machines stopped. The guards' rifles lost power. The energy locks on Moran's chains shut down with a sharp click. Moran stood up slowly, the chains falling to the ground. He looked at Vorak, who stepped back in disbelief. "You humans," Vorak said. "You think you can survive without us?" Moran walked forward. "We survived worse than you. We survived silence, hunger, and fear. You cannot break what you do not understand." Vorak tried to strike him, but Moran blocked the hit and pushed him back. The crowd erupted in noise. The workers, who had watched for years in silence, began to shout. They started throwing off their guild marks and joining the children. The guards looked around in confusion. Some threw away their weapons and walked away. Others joined the people. The square became a storm of voices. People shouted for freedom. The orphans gathered around Marone. Rin handed him the blue chip. "This is what you built," Rin said. "You told us every code has a heart." Moran took the chip and inserted it into the guild's main console beside the stage. The machine glowed white, then projected a message into the sky. It read, "The Trade Guild is no more. From this day, every child, every worker, every being is free." Cheers rose from the crowd. The walls around the colony opened, and for the first time, the people saw the horizon beyond the city. Vorak tried to run. The citizens caught him and handed him to the new council for justice. The guild banners were burned. In their place, the people raised a new flag, one made from cloth torn from the orphan cages. Days turned into weeks. The colony changed. The old factories were rebuilt into homes and schools. The orphans became part of new families. Marone was given a small house near the valley, where the children often came to visit. He taught them how to repair machines, how to grow crops in the dry soil, and how to keep their freedom safe. He always said, "Freedom is not a gift. It is a seed. You must water it every day." Rin grew older and helped build a new communication network so every colony could speak freely. Lena worked as a healer for those who had suffered under the guild. The others learned, worked, and dreamed, just as children should. One evening, when the sky was quiet and the stars began to appear, Marone sat on the porch with Rin. The wind carried the smell of metal and soil, Rin said. "They call you the man who broke the chains." Marone smiled gently. "I only showed you that the chains were weak. You are the ones who broke them." They looked up at the sky. Among the stars, small lights moved, the ships of the new colony patrol, now led by humans and aliens together. The world had changed because one man refused to look away when he saw injustice. The orphans were no longer slaves or lost children. They were the builders of a new dawn. And across the colony, every wall carried one simple message written by the children themselves. Human hands built freedom, and human hearts kept it alive.